This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to Property Showcase, the podcast that brings you closer to the service providers that can inform your decisions about how you buy, manage and research top investment opportunities. Be informed and become a better investor with Property Showcase.
G'day everyone and welcome back to another instalment of the Property Showcase. I'm your host, Tom Gilmore, Media and Marketing Strategist here at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Guys, today's topic, the movers of property. Now, in business, or in the corporate world, I should say, there's terms known as first or second movers. Now, we're going to sort of look at this from a property market perspective, not to be a dictionary or a thesaurus in any way, shape or form, but the gentleman I have in the room today is certainly a fan favourite. And the only reason we're able to sort of break down this topic is because of this person. The gentleman I have in the room today is the Director and Head of Research, Arjun Paliwal. He is, through, I suppose, my own personal observation and through working with Arjun, I suppose now over the past, I think it's at least 3 years, I've actually been able to witness what InvestorKit and what the property nerds have been able to achieve time and time again, when we look at certain areas within the Australian property market, whether that be Tassie 2017 or Adelaide Brizzy through the rise there in 2018/19. But to dive into the three main points of the movers of property today, guys, we've got the first, second and third movers, and we're going to let Arjun take this away today. Arjun, how are you going?
Oh, mate, I'm well, and it's always good to be on the mic with you, Tom. Mate, it's a very interesting one when we think of all the different movers, isn't it?
Mate, absolutely. So I was sort of saying this off air. I think, just having a conversation and looking through, I suppose, some of the definitions that we're about to break down here today, a lot of this, as I pointed out just now earlier, wouldn't have been really possible to understand or know or to even label just without some of the experience that you've had in your own property investing journey / as a business, right?
Yeah, I think with this particular area and the transition from buying agent and more research coming on board, I feel it makes it so much easier to recognize the different movers of markets as well now that we've had the history of data to look at and diagnose, the team and resources to diagnose it, but then also the professional buying experience to see markets through different phases.
Yeah, exactly right. So look, let's dive into it then. So we've got three to break down here, the movers of property. What is a first mover?
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking out, how do you describe the movers of property? Obviously, there's business terms of first mover, second mover, advantages, disadvantages. But I wanted to try bring a property flavor to it. And the first, second, and third movers came about when I thought of what are those earliest of lead indicators of a market starting to show change? Second, what were the things that followed those lead indicators and lagged to show that this is legit, something's happening here? And then third is, wait, this is too late. And people are thinking that it's now the perfect time, but really it's not. So when I think of the first mover, to start off with that, we're talking all things economy. When you think of a housing market, what starts building the confidence in a housing market is improved jobs through job advertisements, lowering unemployment, a sense of confidence through increased infrastructure in the pipeline, more activity that also brings more jobs. And so when you put all of these things together, now you can combine it with a few other big hitter items, availability of finance in that economy, commodities, sentiment. There's a mix of things, but long story short, you're now in the city. You're not so much concerned about the housing, you're concerned about the city and its environment. And this is where you're genuinely first movers. Now, by first movers, it takes a lot of courage because there can be pros and cons. The pros are you're likely going to be buying a lot of property in a faster, easier, less competitive environment. You're also going to be having property prices that over the years ahead are likely to have greater percentage gain because you've been that early to the market. But the downside of the first mover, Tom, is that, how soon do these economy fundamentals transition to price growth is not as clear as everyone thinks. Like, I'm equipped with over $100,000 in spend in research and data each year. And yet I can hand on heart say with all these resources and things, it's not very easy to use that first mover advantage to come out and say next year we're going to see prices grow simply because the economy is strong. And so that's kind of where the pros and cons come of that first mover. It's the greatest place to be in for property investing. It is also the place where the greatest confidence lies in terms of the city, but the transition from it to housing trends can take a few years. And I mean, throughout the podcast, I'll also drop some examples of these different trends as well.
I want to just target that a little bit more. Just within these labels of first, second, and third movers within the economy, and when you actually assess when you're going to begin, perhaps even just begin researching an area, right, that you're going to look to invest in, be it personally or be it via business. Is that like the first critical point that you look at before you start targeting, like you said, with the amount of money that you're putting into the research data points behind you? Is that like, bam, here we go, this is the key indicator to begin? Or is there a whole range that we've got to look through?
Yeah, so if you're a first mover type of approach in terms of trying to target markets like that, for sure, like the local economy is what truly starts it. We're looking at, the job advertisements, for example, in the last 12 months, the amount of markets that have seen their job ads explode, from the north coast of New South Wales, that's a great example there, to Adelaide as a capital city, Brizzy as well, have seen their job ads explode. These are powerful movers in the city's confidence, ability to afford, be in the game of housing demand and playing that game because of the opportunities for work or unemployment falling. These are great starting points. Infrastructure is another great one. Infrastructure adds a lot of depth to the city. It adds a lot of excitement to the city, more job creation, and a sense of good times ahead when so many things are happening in your home city. So from that perspective, these economy starting points are great to look at because they're what's going to give us that first sense of confidence that this is not just a chart or a trend that looks healthy. This is the genuine city that is producing something it hasn't in the past. And that's the key thing to understand. Economies aren't this perfect thing of, 20 years straight of humming and buzzing, jobs going up, people coming in, confidence high, money cheap, money available, infrastructure being built. As much as we'd like to think that because we're constantly in a neighborhood where we look around and we go, oh my God, that's new, or this is coming in, or that's great. It's not the case at all. Many cities go through condensed periods of spend and economic prosperity, and then they tend to fizzle out after some time because governments change, leadership changes, spending and budgets change. There's many different things that come into it. Commodity prices change as an example for some of the Western markets. But that's kind of the starting point for us, Tom, when we think of a market.
That was like the perfect play as a list down for the things that followed for the economy to look at as a first mover. I love that. All right, second mover, explain.
Now, this might be interesting to many, but the second mover is my favorite, not the first mover. And, it might sound more strategic and better for your pocket as a first mover. The greatest of all time barbecue stories probably come from the first mover who goes, back in my day, I purchased this before it was this and nothing was there. And now look at it. It's booming and bustling and everything's happening. And look at the prices.
Sounds like something on a Thursday night at the REB 2022 awards, mate.
So this is where second mover, though, is my favorite. And I'll tell you why. The second mover is now when we move from economic trends and economic activity to housing trends. Now, to just list a few and go through the property nerds' favorite trends as an example, sales volumes increasing as more people buying. Days on market falling as people buying it faster. Listings falling is less properties available for sale. Low vacancy rates and lowering vacancy rates is less properties for rent and faster time to find a tenant. Less vendor discounting is vendors going, hey, you know what? I'm not going to give away much from this one. The campaign's strong. And then when you think of building approvals in the pipeline, less future supply coming up. When you think of yields, how much return you're going to get on a property for how much you buy it for. So 10-year growth versus 1-year growth. The key here is that you can actually now use data to tell a story. And typically the second mover will be able to say two stories. Story number one is something's happened in the last 1 to 2 years that is better than the last 5 and 10-year averages. So it's clear to say that something is happening. Story point number two is when you look at all those trends, imagine I don't use the terms that they are, listings, volumes, all that. Just put that to the side. And we'll just talk about what it actually means. So imagine you're in a housing market and you go, okay, how do I quickly tell if something is happening and that second mover, the housing trends are alive? People are selling faster, not much available. People don't give away discounts. Things go really quickly in the market. Things are selling for more each week. It's hard to find a rental property. So difficult, lots of applications. So now I've thrown out all the property jargon away. This is purely a sentence and paragraph you can have with your mate. And if this is happening, you're seeing trends come alive that charge up a housing market. These trends, put it this way, I've never seen a housing market explode in value growth that didn't have these trends happen. In history, it's never happened. Value growth occurs when these trends move strong. Now, they could move really quickly and you might have missed the intensity of how fast this happened, but no markets grow without these trends moving in the right way. So the power here is you now combine the first mover economy and the strengthened economy. Now you back it with housing trends. So what's the pro and con? Because everything has pros and cons in life.
I was waiting for it, mate.
You know me, that's my favorite, the pros and cons. I never like to be a pro person. But the pro is your level of confidence in a decision that a market is likely to be doing well is extremely high. Your ability to be in a competitive environment, so you can see it in front of you. When you got a property, you either missed out and 10 people were going for it, or you got it and 10 people lost against you. So what that now means is you are in an environment where someone now has to pay more to get the next one. So this is the pros. The cons is it's not fun to miss out. I'd love to buy every single property I have a crack at, but the truth is I don't.
Yep.
And it's also not fun to see things rise in front of you every single month as you're trying to buy something. You just wish that, hey, what if I'd bought there in December, September, January last year? So these are the cons, but I would much rather live in the world of a second mover because I now am being backed by my first mover economy data and then second mover trends. And I'll give or take the bruises and bumps you get in a competitive environment to come out knowing that I feel confident about where this market's headed.
I think this correlates more into also where you, not only from a data perspective, but also your expertise, like you and your team. And actually, I'm not trying to say that you spoon feed people, but in terms of, for lack of better words, holding their hands throughout this process, and the reason why you're actually so integral, especially to a second mover, right, looking to purchase again, it can be obviously really defeating when those things are really going up. You're like, oh, well, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Could have done that in October, 2019 or whatever it is. Like we all could have done that. That would have been great. It's bringing back memories of my own family, to be honest. But it's, I think this is sort of key to what you guys actually do in pointing this out. Now, you've obviously got a lot of research and you go head first deeply before you start looking to invest in any area. This, would you agree, is just the part of everything you could get at InvestorKit?
Yeah. So for us, this is where I feel our biggest separation is when it comes to the industry we operate in. Because as a consumer, I guess it's difficult to kind of go, hey, which buyer's agent should I work with? Why should I work with them? Where we're coming in to make a difference is we're not here to talk about the promised land of the first mover and all these great fancy things that could happen here and then be just disappointed when things don't happen in the first, couple of years as you want to reduce opportunity cost. Our biggest track record, which Tom, me and you've talked about the many cities in the past, our biggest track record comes from going, we understand the drivers of the first moving market, but we want to see the second mover come to give us the greatest confidence. And we're still here relatively earlier than the third mover to ensure that we can reduce opportunity cost when buying property.
Yeah, I'm cheating a little bit. I've known you now for years and I've been able to witness this into practice, right? I mean, God, when did we meet? Very, very early 2018, we were talking about Ballarat then. Furthermore, we started looking at Albury Wodonga 2019. You're like, there we go. We said it again. And I went, holy hell, this guy's doing it again.
And I think more importantly as well, I can't buy every property that comes up for myself, but each of those years I put my money where my mouth is for myself. And that's something I feel really excited with, is to be on the journey with my clients. So hint for any clients working with us between September and December, not a fun period because that's where I'm looking for property too. So I'm clearly going to take the best one. But look, that's the best one in one given week. I'm not buying 100 for myself or anything. I'm buying 1 a year, 2 a year max. But yeah, Tom, what you said is perfect. And I think the most important thing to mention, though, is this notion of everything's grown pre-COVID versus post. to give you an example of those markets you mentioned, the same factors that we mentioned on this show back in 2018 were used to identify Ballarat as a market. Now, Ballarat pre-COVID had already had 18, 19, and pre-COVID 20 double-digit per annum growth each of those years. So this wasn't like hey, we stood quiet and then all of a sudden, it wasn't like going, okay, I bought in the suburbs of Logan in 18, and I'm not saying Logan's bad for anyone wanting to invest there, but I'm saying in 2018 and 19, they weren't moving, but someone kept preaching, go for the long term. And then come 2020 and 2021, only then the rest of the country moves and they catch up.
Yeah, we're not talking about the extreme.
In 2017, right. And in 2017, I personally used the same methodology for myself in Burnie, Tasmania. Same thing there from 17 to 20. Again, we're talking pre-COVID, double-digit gains each year throughout. So it's not to say that the methodology is absolutely perfect, but it's to say that as an investor, if you're looking at a checklist and you're only being presented 3 of 20 things to tick, well, your likeliness of striking something in a positive nature is far lower. Whereas if we can say, here's 20 points, and 17 of them are ticked or 16 of the ticked, because not everything's pros and pros, your likeliness of having a greater outcome in the coming few years is much better.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Third mover, the final point.
Yeah,
what is this?
Third movers are, and to quickly find out who a third mover is simply ask them about their decision on why they invested in a market. Mm-hmm. And if they'd say anything to do with, it's a growth region, it's grown really well, it's had tremendous growth in the last 10 years, it doubles. Well, that's an example of a third mover. So the third mover is someone who moves purely on comfort and purely on confidence, less to do with housing trend analysis, less to do with economy analysis. And this is unfortunately the majority of buyers. Now, what's really important about the first, second, third is that whichever mover you are, if you hold something long enough, you're probably going to be okay.
That's the rule of thumb, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the long term. That's what we do. But the short term and the short to medium term, the third mover is likely at the highest point of risk. So to give you context, someone who'd bought in the market of Sydney in 2017 would have been a third mover seeing, wow, I live in Sydney. I want to buy in Sydney. I'm comfortable with Sydney. It's grown tremendously, doubled in value almost from 2010 to 2017. Every one of my mates is buying here. All my mates are catching up with me, with their money that they've made and how rich they are sitting on all this Sydney equity, and how my friend over there pulled out equity, bought a Lambo, and the other friend is, pulled out equity and having the best time of his life or her life on travels. The stories were ridiculous of what you heard during that time, and it was just unreal. But guess what? You're using confidence and comfort in the past to guide your decision ahead. When we talk about the Burnie in 2017, the years prior, the growth was subpar and horrible. When we talk about 2018 in Ballarat, the years prior were subpar and average. When we talk about 2019 in Bendigo, the years prior were consistent, 4 to 5%. None of these were Sydney, but all of them outperformed Sydney between 2017 and 2020. And when you now include 2021, they're still outperforming them. Yep. That was an example of a peak market by someone looking back. So the key thing to think about is that the third mover, if you're going to hold it long enough, anyone holding an asset through Sydney's next 30 years is still going to be very well placed, in my opinion, just by what history has shown us. But constantly depending on the last 5, the last 10 to guide your decision is the part where opportunity cost is impacted. You become the third mover who pushes comparable sales up for us second movers and first movers. And this helps us, but it's not really something that we feel brings a great joy to your pocket in the short term.
So I want to tie this into the audience now, 2 parts. I think this would be really fun. I don't even know if you'd know the percentage off the top of your head, but I reckon it'd be a good guess. But obviously I want to crack into, how does this actually help in the long term? So first off, out of the 3 movers here, first, second, third, how many as a percentage do you think are third movers in the total populace of Australia?
Oh, this is good. So my thinking here is I would say more than 2/3. That's my gut feel, are third movers, because unless you're obtaining a professional, support or self-educated learning to such a standard where you're truly committed to property investing, you're likely running off the back of past results to kind of judge your decision and comfort to do with your city. So I would say 2/3 off the top of my head guess.
Wow. The way I'm looking at you face to face, and that was a very confident answer at the same time whilst you delivered that. So that was quite good. Do you think people are probably checking themselves right now, listening to this, thinking, oh God, which category do I fall into?
Yeah, I think what makes it super hard right now is that anyone buying in 2022, it's going to feel like you're a third mover because of how much growth is happening across the country. And that is understandable, right? I mean, there is a huge amount of growth that's been happening across the country these last 2 years. What you can do in terms of, your tactics for buying, I guess, is combine these first and second mover when making that decision. So example, there's the trends that are healthy in the last 2 years, and they're a strong local economy, and that you're not just buying in something because it's had a good last 2 years, even though its economic picture is weak, or you're just buying something in the last 2 years because you think the growth that happened here is going to be here forever. So these things can be done, but yes, it will be a bit disheartening for some who are trying to avoid being the third mover, who may look like it on paper because most locations have done 20% plus.
For sure.
I think looking at the three options, I mean, and just to bring some examples to life of certain markets as well, a third mover, some market might be someone looking at Sydney and Melbourne and going, hey, it's had amazing growth in the last decade. It fell a bit down during 2 years, then it recovered really quickly. And now we're having some more amazing growth. And this is going to last forever. And I want to be here, for my next investment, even if it means more people leaving the cities than before, units and townhouses still sitting around quite vacant, and whatever factors they may look into. But that's one way that you can clearly say that you might be too attached to a city rather than looking at the greater country. Another way someone can consider it is the second mover markets, right? The second mover markets, an example could be Adelaide, Toowoomba, Brisbane. These are just some examples of second mover markets. These are areas where the benefit of trend analysis plus local economy strengthening are all coming together. An example where people can make the first mover markets and make some mistakes, right? If you go wind the clock back 3 or 4 years, Townsville is a market where the economic landscape is just phenomenal. The projects in pipeline, everything coming together. But you would have still been quite early. You would have missed out on a lot of gains elsewhere had you been in Townsville for the last few years. However, those considering Townsville over the next 6 to 12 months are now starting to see second mover advantage come together, right? You're starting to see your first mover economy strengthening. You're seeing your trends for housing come together. So this is how you can just quickly use some market examples to bucket and categorize first, second, third to help reduce opportunity costs. Remember, over the long term, all three buckets, you're going to be okay. But if you want to reduce opportunity costs, this is just using a checklist of many things to make life easier.
Well, I tell you what, I actually want to make the people tuning into this, I want to make their lives easier. Now, you've actually got a bit of an offer for everyone tuning in. So I'll pass the salt shaker on to you. What can people do to get their hands, whether it be on the points that we've talked about today, or actually see some evidence and some research, some market analysis, a white paper, if you will, into what we talked about today?
Yeah, totally. So for anyone keen to see an example of a market analysis that covers those different types of markets in deeper view and all these different research points we've mentioned come together, I'm doing this for the first time ever, where I'm giving away our client report for the city of Toowoomba. And this is a market we've been active in and, just been reviewing and been working quite well for many of our buyers who've bought with us early on in this market. And if you email Arjun, which is ARJUN, that's my personal email, at InvestorKit, InvestorKit.com.au. Have your subject line as Toowoomba Research and just send me an email. We will make sure we get you out a link to our interactive client report for Toowoomba. So this is to show you the power of what goes in our analysis for first, second, third moving cities.
For all of you tuning in as well, whether it be on your various platforms, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts / the smartpropertyinvestment.com.au website / podcasts, we will also put this in the bio for you as well, so you can actively get in touch with Arjun, and we'll use the prompt subject code that Arjun has used there too. Arjun, mate, this has been absolutely phenomenal. I've really enjoyed this chat. We've had this chat, a few times off air as well, and not to mention, as I've said time and time again throughout this episode, I've seen this put into practice. And it's really cool to, I suppose, objectively come at this and sort of break it down for everyone. So, mate, I'll be downloading it myself just so I can, I'm not very good at sort of putting words on paper. Probably not even better at putting words to a microphone, to be honest with you. So it's something I'm pretty keen to get my hands on. But, mate, thank you so much.
Anytime, my friend. I hope the listeners found this of value. And this is just kind of pulling back the curtains on what we do here in-house for many of our clients. And if you'd like to know more about, what we do for clients, InvestorKit.com.au. We've got multiple research papers that are constantly featured on major media, and they're all for free, including some of our blog posts as well, which we're releasing out weekly super in-depth, not just blog posts for the sake of a blog post, not just content for the sake of a website to have content, but we're putting out 1,000 to 2,000 word plus detailed blog posts to help you improve your investing results and journey.
Excellent. And everyone tuning in as well, if you're interested in actually hearing about Arjun's personal property investing journey, in addition to more of his property expertise, you can find Arjun scattered all throughout the smartpropertyinvestment.com.au website. You can find many podcasts where Arjun has spoken with either myself or Phil Tarrant, of course, managing editor here at SPI. And I also implore you to dive into that because it's, I suppose for the most part, when you actually listen to his investing journey from years ago when he started talking about it to now, you can sort of actively put it into play what we've been talking about today. So everyone tune into that. Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you, mate.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.